Shrikant, you are from the consulting organization with BCG, and you worked with a lot of Indian companies, especially the fintech area and the BFSI area. Artificial intelligence, machine learning, we'll soon talk about cloud, AR, VR. Way too many technologies coming the way, of the IT organizations of companies. How do companies, get clarity in this space, and how do they go about adopting these technologies? I'm sure you're helping many companies do that today.
Sure. Very good point. Just to clarify, I'm not with BCG, so just wanted to start with that. So I'm going to take a step back, right? I mean, what's more important for us to look at is, while we have artificial intelligence as a tool, are we really looking at solving the right problems, right? Because it's important to start, at the right end. We all talk about technology. I have, phenomenal technology innovation happening. IBM Watson went through this journey of saying, hey, what can I do with Watson, right? And now we are coming up with more use cases. So first of all the applications should start of technology from the business end, saying, what is the problem statement which I have, and is it worth solving before I picking up AI? So AI may not be always the answer to some of the problem statement. You may have different solutions. We may have a simpler solutions. You may have a mix of multiple technologies coming in, right? So that would be my starting point. The second thing we need to look at, we need to break down AI a bit further. There is a general artificial intelligence and there is a specialized or a niche artificial intelligence, right? Now, most of you know that, do you guys know what is the general artificial intelligence IQ? IQ of general artificial intelligence? Anybody? Anybody has read? No, I'm not defining, I'm not asking what's the IQ of general AI.
You should ask Google.
Individuals have IQ, right? All of us have, IQs. So the IQ of a general AI is like somewhere 49 or something, which is 49 point something, which is equal to a 6-year-old, right, today, and which is what Google AI is offering. So I just want to differentiate between a specific AI or a niche AI versus a general AI, right? So I mean, all of us now feel smarter, right? I just want to make you guys feel better today. When you look at the niche AI, right? You heard about Kasparov. I mean, there is a very interesting book, Deep Thinking, right? He's a superstar for me. I used to play chess, and I believe that the way he has described in the book, right? That he experienced a different level of intelligence while playing with the computer, right? So that is something which we are all seeking. We are looking at something where AI, Turing test is like, is a starting point, but we are looking at something which excites the best and, where we can create the difference, right? So while we are defining this, then there are some specialized tasks the machine can do better than human beings, right? And if I talk about banking or financial institution, the journey is not simple. Like, you don't start with AI. You just don't say like, I want to get into AI immediately. There are multiple stages. The first step is primarily doing robotics process automation, which is called RPA, which is basically, in simple terms, automating as many functions as you can, right? The second wave or second phase for you is integrating voice commerce. Right, as Mandar was talking about Amazon or Google, you need to bring a lot of your functionalities or interfaces, be it customer interfaces or be it the backend interactions on voice. So that is NLP is the second phase. The third phase is where you actually have to collect a lot of data, which is where machine learning comes in. You can't really train a machine. I mean, there have been a lot of debates on saying how much data is enough and what we can really do. The challenge is, there was no data available in the past. So today we have data. So that's the third phase where you actually train the train the machine, and you get the machine to do a lot of processes. And the last step is where some of the banks in India, across the world, Mizuho Bank in India, HDFC Bank has launched their humanoids are where you actually go in. So that's the primarily journey of how AI should evolve. If you're not fixing the first two and just directly jumping onto the third phase, you're going to face a lot of challenges, because you do not have automation, you do not have voice which integrates. You can skip part of it, but at the end of the day, you will need a lot of data to cover that. And to specifically talk about financial services industry, you have wealth management. A lot of funds have come up with you have robo advisors today, right? You don't need to go to a human being, so all your wealth is managed by robo advisors, and they are quite successful. There are certain examples on customer onboarding, Eva, multiple examples where when you go onto a website today or an app, you have the immediate availability of someone. It's a robot who's or an assistant who is doing that. So that is what I would say, that think about AI as a tool for solving a specific problem, differentiate AI, look at the overall journey, and make sure that you have the right use case to move forward.
Sure. Thanks. That was very useful. Ashok, you work with Syntel, and you are currently running their service transformation organization. And as someone who's been in the IT industry some time back, I do know the amount of service transformation that's happening in the companies. So whereas all of us are talking about AI ML in our customer context, we also know that a lot of work is going towards service delivery transformation using artificial intelligence. So if you could talk a bit about service delivery transformation or service transformation using artificial intelligence, machine learning in your organization. And I know you have the SynBot, so you could touch upon that as well.
Absolutely. I think great questions, because as consultants, we always go consult others, right? But it's important to also consult to ourselves, see inward, and see what transformation can be done. Broadly, if you look at industry over a 20-year cycle, I think it probably, one dimension, it's going back to where it started, right? So we just used to have mainframes, IBM used to do systems, and we used to work with the business and write the applications. And now since Mandar is here, now Microsoft runs the cloud, and all the infrastructure, the PaaS is there, and we go back to a simplified world where our consultants now need to focus on the business problem and write business functions, leveraging, let's say, Microsoft Cloud to deliver that. So in that dimension, what we're seeing is it's gone back, right? There is a simplified infrastructure, very limited combinations of what you could do. Life becomes simpler from focusing on what is required from a business perspective. From a business dimension, if you really look at it, I think what has become complex from a technology perspective is all those technologies keep changing. So there are 100 functions in Microsoft, there are 100 startups, there are 100 functions in other technology platforms. So then the choice becomes, what do you really choose to drive that business benefit? So from a service delivery perspective, the focus transforms from core technology expertise, where I think it all started in between, where you used to have an in-layered architecture and in-layered combinations, so many sysadmins, middlewares, databases, so much complexity coming in. So now that a deep technology expertise is now moving towards a problem solver expertise, where you really need people to say, hey, I have a great understanding, appreciation of technology, but at the same time I have a great understanding of the business need. How can I marry the both and give the solution as fast as possible? So that's the first change that we're driving as a culture in the service delivery organization, which essentially means that you are no more a Java expert, but you are a problem solver who can go full stack, all stacks. So the first dimension. Second dimension, in terms of, absolutely, we have to dog food ourselves to try some of these technologies, experiment. So multiple areas, and as if you look at the AI journey, broadly there are two dimensions in where it's immediate action. So one is everything to do with the interactions. So you have the voice, you have the intelligent agents, You have traditional models of what used to be faxes, invoices coming in different formats, which is ingested by the machines. So what we now call as AI is the new UI. All of our internal service delivery, which means us asking for our experience certificates, to raising a leave, to asking for a software installation, is all in natural language. So you can go to an equivalent of a virtual assistant and ask for it to provision software. So what used to take us 2 days, now you get it in a couple of minutes when you ask that natural bot to do it for you. So the user interaction is gone down. The other dimension of AI, which definitely will take time, and like Srikanth said, needs discipline, needs data, needs structure to kind of get there, is the decision making part of things. So that's where we're seeing AI used in multiple areas. Simplest being execution. So if there are repeated activities that were done, a combination of both robotic automation plus some where it can learn without being told, it plays a big role. So simple things like monitoring, restarts, that's the simplest thing it starts. All the way to how could you write a new program? It says if a claims denial was written with million lines of COBOL code, you can do it with same configuration of algorithms without having to write more than 500 lines of code. So that's how we're transforming from a delivery perspective, leveraging both dimensions internally and then of course a lot more externally.
Thanks Ashok. Thanks for this perspective, because most people in the audience also know the consumer end of application, not so much as how IT companies, solution companies are transforming themselves with the same technology. So, to you, Bala, Mphasis is also in a very interesting crossroad. The digital revenues are growing, and increasingly companies look at digital revenues as an indicator of where the company is going. It's not just the size of revenue anymore. Tell us something about how Mphasis is going about digital transformation with its customers, and what are some of the frameworks and some of the models with which you are trying to achieve that transformation?
Sure. So our belief, taking cue from what Srikanth said, we firmly believe that any transformation, as I already hinted during my keynote, transformation has to be keeping business in the center stage, not the technology. Technology is an enabler, but it should be the business. So for that, reiterating that fact, we have something called front to back, F2B we call. What does front to back mean is, in a simpler terms, you look at the core systems, which Ashok also was mentioning. You have a core systems which run, which has been running for ages, right? And like a CIO like Sneha, she cannot shut down overnight. It has to remain, right? At the same time, here is the millennials, or who expects a hyper personalization demand. But many companies apply a pig, a lipstick to the pig, right? And then say, oh, this is called so-and-so digital transformation. Actually, what they may do is upgradation. They may not do digital transformation. So what we believe is, when we go to the customer, we say that, hey, there is an engagement layer, and there is a core system at the back. But the transformation actually happens at the intelligence layer, which actually sits in the middle. And the intelligence layer contains cloud, cognitive, and various other stuff, which we speak so far, right? Whether it's machine learning, whether it's cognitive, natural language processing, artificial intelligence, everything. But the key here is going back to an example of how a Facebook does, right? A Facebook gives the same feel for a customer. Customer does a like, and next time Facebook knows what the customer liked last time, or what he or she shared, and bring the same content back to this one and gives us as a recommendation. So that in a way is artificial intelligence coming in, right, where it goes in. So bringing in those kind of stuff is what we see as a front to back transformation to the customers, to say that while to fund this transformation initiative, if I go to the CIOs and say, what, I'm going to do all this, the biggest question people will ask is, okay, I have the core system, I have to still run it. I'm not going to get rid of it, but you are talking about all front end, like she said already, right? You talk all great things on the front end, you talk about intelligence layer. So we say that you shrink the core. You don't need to run the core as such, but you shrink the core, whatever is the savings we get it, we fund it for this. So it's not a very ambitious pitch we give, but we actually say that it's a front to back. And front to back is powered with our offering and framework called X2C square. What we actually mean by X2C square is we believe that anything can be moved to cloud to the power of cognitive. And workload by workload, you start looking at it, then you look at a middleware, then you look at an application, and then again application to cloud. When you look at, we have an offering again there to say which all applications need to necessarily be transformed to cloud, which has to be native cloud, it has to be rebuilt, which can be retired, which can be retained, all that. So our entire thing that we see with the customer base is they are in different part of transformation journey, digital transformation journey. Some are already ahead of it, some are still testing waters, right? They, like she says, there are too many consultants, too many providers who come and say, can I do this for you? That's the stage we see the customers. Internally also, like what Ashok said, we also eat our own dog food. We ensure that some of it that we propose to our customers, we first test it ourselves, right? And can we build the same service transformation platform internally and try to see whether the STP can be the answer to go and tell the customer, going back to the automation that Srikanth spoke about, I'm going to do automation, but this is going to reduce this much, and this is the benefit you are going to see. Sure. So we first do it internally to what we call client emphasis, to our CAO, right? So our CAO becomes our own customer. First we do the testing to see whether it works, and so it doesn't go anywhere. All mistakes sorted out here. Then we go to the customer and say, here is a proof of pudding. That's what we do.
Wonderful, wonderful. So when we talk about AI/ML, cloud can't stay behind, right? Cloud, the public cloud, or the private cloud, there are many private cloud providers as well, colo providers. Basically, cloud has, in some ways, I think, made scale irrelevant, because a company which is very small today also gets to tap into the same frameworks and infrastructure that a large company could, right? So we are talking about, are we living in a world where scale has ceased to matter, where the power of an idea could be more important? So therefore, the cloud conversation cannot be left behind, and we have to talk about cloud. So my first question has to be to you, Mandar, since you are representing Azure. Talk a bit more about the cognitive edge and the cognitive cloud, and tell us what kind of jobs is the cloud spawning, especially in India, and what kind of capabilities one needs to have. And you talked about some very interesting logistics use cases. And what are some of the first movers of cloud, at least in India, and which industries seem to be benefiting more from it?
Sure. Kind of taking a step back, what you said is very interesting. There is public cloud, private cloud, all kind of clouds. What we fundamentally believe is that this is going to go away, right? Today, those models exist because there is a line of distinction. Private is something is on my premise, I do certain things on private. Public is something is provided by a service provider, it stays somewhere else. But fundamentally, those models and the lines between them are blurring. So very soon you will stop referring to public private, you will stop referring to different cloud. It will be just cloud, and you will see customers using cloud as they want. Right now we categorize cloud as public private hybrid, we talk about IaaS, PaaS, SaaS. I think those lines are blurring very fast. These models existed earlier because they were very, very different, and it was early adoption stage for industry. I think IaaS is a done deal now. It has got commoditized, and people are fast moving to platform services, advanced services. So clearly, as we move forward, you cannot say that I will choose one model for my company. You will end up using multiple models, right? You will put something on private cloud, data probably that is very critical, intellectual property, you don't want to put that on public. You will use some of the advanced services like cognitive on public cloud. You cannot say cognitive services I will deliver end to end on premise, simply because cognitive services require humongous amount of data. The more data that you feed to it, the more accurate they become. For example, face recognition, right? Face recognition becomes very, very, it becomes better the number of faces that it processes. Like India, you got different type of, India is like practically 20-30 countries in one country. You got different type of people, different looking, different attires. So if somebody wants to predict or process Indian data, then that service should have actually fed through multiple millions of Indian faces. So that's something that probably will always going to be on the public cloud. The third parameter of that is going to be intelligent edge, because of IoT, because of the computing process. So industry has kind of come full circle. We started with mainframe, we said no, there is distributed. Every Microsoft mission was putting desktop on every desk, desktop on a desktop computer on every desk, right? Then we said no, now you don't need desktop, you need everything on public cloud. But now we have come a full circle. We are seeing that whether it is fog computing that you referred, whether it is intelligent edge, some intelligent is going back to the edge. Whether it is what we do like Azure Stack, whether it is IoT edges that are becoming more and more intelligent. So ultimately what is happening is the line between different clouds is blurring, and you will have like you will become more service oriented. I need this, I will use it from the best provider who is offering it, that's it. I would not care where is it run from, I would not care whether it is public, private, IaaS, PaaS, SaaS. That's something that we are clearly seeing happening. To answer your second question, who is adopting that in India and what kind of jobs it is creating, specifically on the cloud and AI, obviously early adopters are the ones who did not have any legacy. So you see e-commerce, you see new age businesses, they are not cloud first, they are cloud only. They practically have no assets, right? We talk about asset light organizations, but these are no assets organizations. There are e-commerce who have built their entire business models on it. Second, logistic companies, you mentioned interesting cases. I see logistics in India is going through a major transformation for 2 or 3 things. We didn't have that massive sector earlier. It kind of, apart from the physical logistic world, or more controlled in by certain organization, it is going through tremendous transformation because of e-commerce and different delivery that is happening. They are one of the fast adopters of whether it is cloud or blockchains and technologies like that. A lot of technology is helping them cut time, helping them become more predictable. So they are probably the second one. Fintech is very interesting, right? Fintech is where a lot of interest, lot of adoption is happening. The only difference is they are doing that adoption on their own terms. They will not join the bandwagon like e-commerce or startups. They will kind of try to mold that technology as they want. So that's the third sector that I would say. You talked about healthcare. That's the sector where there is a lot of adoption which is happening. I would say these are the primary drivers. Apart from that, you see different adoption. When I say healthcare, that includes healthcare, pharma as well. So you see those companies definitely looking at different models. Rest of them are probably they're doing something. Government is also looking at different cloud models. I think Maharashtra came with a cloud policy. Central government came with a cloud empanelment. So you see, it is no longer there are pockets. It's very broad based, but whether everybody is on the same page, no, I would say not. Some of them are far ahead, but you clearly see a trend that cloud is the way to go. Answering your last question, on the jobs, so there is a lot of discussion that happens, right? AI is going to cut jobs and all of that. I have a slightly different opinion. We have this debate practically every 10 years in IT, right? Around Y2K we had the same debate. Y2K is gone, Indian IT industry is finished. Then there was dot-com boom, Indian IT industry finished. Almost every 10 years we hear this debate, and I think Sintel and Emphasis colleagues can talk a little bit more. But I think it just change of profile, right? You require different kind of people. You now need people who can do AR, VR programming. You need people who can do business model, who will solve for business model, as he mentioned in his keynote. You may not want a hand coder. You may not want a Java programmer with 3 years experience who will come and do programming. You will want somebody who will go deep, understand what is the business problem, and probably come with a solution. So the skills are changing. I don't think anyone is going to say we are no longer going to need people. It's the job profile which is going to change, and that in industry happens every 10 years. I'm talking of IT, but I'm sure in other industry also there is similar transformation which happens. In fact, in my opinion, if where the trends are going, we are better positioned because we don't have so much of legacy. India never had those huge mainframes, or some of our industrial organizations were not so much heavy on IT. So they are jumping the curve. You talked about connected cars and some other things, right? So I'm seeing a lot of manufacturing companies actually jumping, and we see people like Mahindra talking about fourth industrial revolution and how we can leapfrog over China. So I think this is an opportunity for us to embrace rather than saying this is going to impact our jobs.
Sure, sure. Yeah, makes sense. Sneha, to you as the only CIO here, in terms of user organizations, especially, you come from a very regulated industry segment. Where do you see the cloud adoption going? I mean, you have your regulations to also take care of. So if you could talk about it.
Yeah, it's pretty ironical that Mandar is sitting here, and then we also have conversations outside this panel when he comes to sell the cloud space to Cipla. So we've had a lot of conversations with Mandar outside of this place. But I personally am a huge fan of the cloud, okay, because I think it takes away a lot of headaches of the IT function in terms of operational overheads. Do I have enough of data space? Can I grow? Can I just put in? Is it secured? Where I have a challenge, and where the guys who are providing service, whether it's AWS, whether it's Microsoft, I think they come selling it to the IT function, okay, and they do not have enough of people spread who can come and have conversations with the rest of the people in the organization. So typically in an environment, in a pharma company where it's so, like you said, it's extremely regulated, and you've got inspectors coming in and people wanting to touch and feel, where is the data stored, where do you have a backups, how do I... So every time we've had this conversation, there's been a pushback from the organization to say, is the cloud secured? Am I covered against all the regulatory aspects of it? Tomorrow if a US FDA guy comes in and he has 15 questions to ask me, if you're not going to respond to it, will Microsoft be able to respond to it? And when you go back to these guys, a lot of people are still making the white paper, okay, to say that, yes, we are now getting compliant, 21 CFR, which is very pharma specific. But I think there needs to be some speed and some understanding of the industry, and to be able to appreciate why there is not such a high adoption in the pharma industry, especially on applications which are prone to audits, manufacturing, quality. Cipla has been one of the first companies to put in a lot of such applications on the cloud. But there's a lot of challenge internally to be able to convince the quality heads, the IPD heads, the RA heads, is it secure? Now with GDPR coming in, okay, is the data which is prone to privacy, will it leak out from there? Will I get that 4% levy on my income? Because, so I'm saying that part of it needs to be better addressed to be able to bring in that confidence, because otherwise the IT guys are left with that job. And it just makes it even more challenging to then migrate. And to the point that Mandar made, the other companies which are only cloud, that's fine. But when you need to migrate from premise to cloud, that's where the challenge really comes in.
But the public cloud providers will tell you that they are absolutely regulation compliant, US FDA compliant. And
absolutely. It's only when you want the document from them where the challenge comes through. Okay, I think that's the challenge.
I'm happy to send it. I don't know how to do sell yet.
So Shrikant, given that, Sneha talked about...
waiting for the next conversation.
I bet you would be.
Sorry, I caught you by surprise. So now that we are talking about GDPR, one aspect that definitely comes up is security on the cloud, right? And as the voice of fintech and banking segments, tell us what are the concerns around cloud, especially from a security perspective. The cloud providers will tell you we have a shared responsibility model and we give you all the provisions to make your implementation secure. But one, how GDPR ready are we, and what are concerns coming from GDPR? Given that the implementation is 25th of May, right? Yeah. And the second, typically, what are the concerns arising from security?
So I'll just step back, right? I was just talking to Dr. Vaidya about one of the event which happened recently, which was the SWIFT conference. They have a subcontinent conference, and Mr. Nandan Nilekani was the main keynote speaker there. What he said is, the most important problem for us to solve today is about the data life cycle. It's not about like Aadhaar or those kind of things, right? We need to look at how the data is generated, how the data is managed, who has the right access to it, and who then consumes the data, who's authorized to consume the data, and then the data is actually eliminated or archived on that. So if you are able to, if a cloud provider is able to give the visibility on saying, hey, how is this going to happen across geographies? And there are companies where now, a lot of data residency requirements have come in. Most of the countries and governments are now pushing for data residency, that data should not leave the country, including now the recent RBI circular which said that even the payment data should not go out of the country, right? So Now, because of data residency, most of the leading providers, Alibaba also started in India recently. They've set up data center in some of the locations. So we are seeing a lot of people, a lot of cloud providers coming in and trying to address the data lifecycle challenge, right? So that is one big chunk of saying, how can I manage the security by keeping the data in-house? Now, in terms of whether you're absolutely right, there are a lot of certifications, a lot of compliance things which are there, but does it make it foolproof? I mean, does it make it like something which CIOs can rest assured? I doubt so, right? I mean, certifications are primarily to make sure that they are meeting certain standards, but it doesn't mean that it's not going to there are not going to be challenges. Cyber security is one of the biggest challenges today across I mean, be it cloud, be it on-prem, even if we go on blockchain, right? There are some challenges with reference to how if I'm replicating data. So that is one challenge which we need to address for sure. There are two conflicting forces here, right? So we talk about GDPR. Are you guys familiar with PSD2? Yes. Right? Okay. So PSD2 says something, which is like slightly, in the opposite direction, where you say, look, the banks have to share the personal data with, user data, transaction data or personal data with the with confirmation from them with the partners. So this whole data cycle is something if a cloud provider is able to manage and convince the CIOs, who would be reasonable, I would assume, to accept that. I think the major battle is won. What is happening is we should also think about the compute and the data and compute. There is a huge potential for compute. I'm not familiar with the Microsoft suite, but having looked into AWS suite, I believe that nothing stops today's IT function to move completely on cloud. In financial sector, if I take NBFC and insurance, they are quite bought onto the concept that yes, we have to move to the cloud. Banks are a little slower. Banks are basically, it's very hard to sell, and Mandar can probably confirm that there are more restrictions on banks to sell as compared to NBFCs, and because of these concerns.
That's the regulator.
Maybe I just want to jump in a little bit, right?
Sure.
So, and forget about whether I work for Microsoft or not. I fundamentally believe cloud is secure. The mistake that many of us do is confuse cloud and cyber security, right? Your environment is as secure or as insecure once you connect a wire to it. If somebody tells me that I'm not connected to network, this is a computer server is not connected to network, I'm willing to believe it is secure. Once you connect, whether you are on cloud or not, you are as secure or as vulnerable. So there is difference between cyber security and cloud security. I fundamentally believe clouds are more secure than your on-premise environment, because that's the business of a cloud service provider. The kind of technology and the money that they invest in making it secure is much better. So security and cloud are two different things, number one. Number two, a lot of discussion that we are doing with GDPR and all that is not security, it's privacy. Who has access to my data? And that's where it has to be 100% cloud service providers ownership. They should be able to raise the hand and say that yes, I will ensure cloud privacy. So on security, yeah, I have a different opinion, but on privacy, it is cloud service provider who has to own it. They can't escape that. And I think GDPR is great, and Microsoft itself is well supportive. We have implemented a lot of stuff, but keep that aside. I think things like GDPR are required regulations. Maybe they go a little bit overboard, the 4% thing that you talked about, but it is time for regulations to work with cloud service providers, IT, user organizations to define data privacy a little bit more. In India, that has to happen. In certain countries, it needs to happen. But that's a different question. It's not security. Security, cloud is better. On privacy, cloud servers need to own it. They can't escape. They should not escape. And I think some of them are making that effort. But I just want that difference to be clear.
I'm with you. My point was that, you know, when people are trying to solve the problem, they are trying to solve the problem of security, including cloud and on-prem version. So it's an end-to-end journey which you have to design. And then as soon as you go to cloud, you know, they find an, you know, some you may find an excuse to say, hey, you know, leakage was not here, data leakage was not here. So I'm saying, like, at some point in time, you know, the ownership of CISO should include cloud as well as this. And then their current, you know, as she was mentioning, their current visibility or understanding of cloud will mature to a level where they'll say, hey, cloud is much more secure as compared to what I had in
if I may intervene, actually I think this is an evolution. You know, it's an evolution that's happening. Even the shared responsibility model needs to evolve, right? If I'm a user of cloud, certain responsibilities are also with me as a user of cloud, right? It's not just the cloud service provider.
Like
So
your
I
own
think
IT, for example, right?
Absolutely. So it will evolve. Now, my last question on cloud, and I'll move on to AR, VR with you, Bala. My last question on cloud is to Ashok. Ashok, you ran the cloud competency within Centel also. As a service provider, as a managed service provider, what kind of opportunities do you see the cloud throw up? You know, it is certainly throwing a lot of opportunities, whether it is from migration to cloud, on cloud native development. So tell us something about the opportunities. And as we go multi-cloud, I'm sure managed services providers are going to have a lot to do, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think first thing, I think all of us have to agree. I think cloud is going to be public cloud. I think we can leave all these other things of private clouds and all those in between. Those were more like your POCs and pilots to say, I can also virtualize, I can orchestrate. But I think where economies of scale comes in, I think public cloud is going to be the de facto. I think once we start accepting it and getting ready for it, I think that's where the enterprises are going. So if we looked at cloud as two very distinctive phases, I think maybe till now or maybe till the next couple of years, I think cloud is all about looking from the rear view mirror and saying, hey, I have a data center, how do I get to the cloud? So a lot of the discussions have been around getting to the cloud. That's where people said this is IaaS, I will own the software, I'll put, or this is PaaS, I will write code. So that's predominantly what's happened till now, and that's where people said, hey, this is my data center, how do I force fit it there? That's been phase one of cloud. I think where the larger opportunity lies, and this is something that we have started doing with transformational clients, is looking at cloud as an economy or an ecosystem. So what we've been able to do is once you start not thinking about what do I move, but if you start thinking to say, if I have my customer data on cloud, or if I have my product data on cloud, if I have my partner data on cloud, that multiplier effect of access to a larger ecosystem in terms of what can your partner do with your data and what can you do with your partner's data within 2 weeks' time. I think that multiplier effect is where the next generation of development will happen on cloud, which is we all call it beyond cloud native. I think cloud native came in to say, I can develop an application faster, but now we're talking about a larger ecosystem or a platform where we're saying there's a multiplier effect, and that's being fed by the newer generation on what we call in cloud as functions, right? Sure. So there is no more IaaS, PaaS, it's functions. A function could be a supply chain function, a function could be a ML algorithm. Mm-hmm. So you have the data, you have your partner's data, and you have functions that says, hey, I can do something with it and create an action. It could be an app, it could be some sort of interaction. So I think that's what we think will drive, and that's where we're focusing on to say how do we leverage this platform ecosystem to create those interconnects, and once those interconnects are there, how do you really exploit those interconnects from an exponential growth perspective. So that's essentially the take on what could cloud provide in terms of opportunities. I think that's the technology is cloud, if I would say.
Sure. Yeah. So now I'll shift gears. We'll move to augmented reality, virtual reality. So the way digital has been all along, it has been 2D. It's a user interface, it's a paper. And the physical world is 3D. And that is where I think that disconnect between the 2D world and the 3D world, that is where the augmented reality and virtual reality plays into, right? And maybe it is not such a big strategy at this point in time, But we certainly think that AR, VR will take off in times to come, right? So from your perspective, Bala, in the limited use cases that are there today, I mean, the use cases in entertainment or gaming or training are very obvious. What has been your experience with augmented reality, virtual reality? How are you helping your customers?
Sure. I'll give a couple of use cases. So I'll probably conclude my point of view on use cases, but I'll still take up on use cases to begin with. The first use case we did 4.5 years ago was for was Schneider Electric. It's world's largest electric circuit and other company, switch company, right? So when we did that, we used Google Glass. So that time, whatever was advanced there, not the AR, VR, the equipment that comes even with the Samsung today, that's not what I'm referring to. So with the Google Glass, we went with equipping the service engineers who are on the field, who go to Schneider Electric's different customers. How can they go and real time take help of the technology and ensure that, if the service engineer is in doubt about the circuits, about which one to do, real time there is a, on one part of the eye, right, there is a virtual reality comes in where the service engineer is able to take a calculated and the right decision to fix the problem and resolve. And immediately it was hooked up to Google Map. It also had a connection with the service manager ticket at the ticketing system at the back end. So the service engineer was also routed to the next place where he or she has to go. So the tickets were resolved then and there. Closure happened, the next ticket assigned, where to go, what is the problem, all that happened. This is something which Schneider liked it, and that resulted in we bagging a huge order from them, right? So that's one part of it. Recently, what we did is for wealth management companies, right? So you talked about gaming and others, but here wealth management companies, even the analysts and the advisors, when they need to give a real-time advice to their customers, right? The customer is sitting in front of them, and they need to take some action real-time. Buy, sell, hold, even swap, your forex. Today it's happening in different markets. If they need to do that real-time, they can actually expand, enhance, look at it. The screen is on, the equipment is on, and then they see the map, they swap, they all done like what. Some of the movies you might have seen happens, right? And then they turn the pages, look at the exact ones, zoom it, take the decision based on real time, check with the customer, then they click and then say yes, order executed. So this is another use case we did, and when we rolled it out to the analyst community last Friday, it was a big hit. We did an analyst meet in our campus. They came, some 90 of them, and each one of them were particularly keen on this because they could correlate what they are doing. Right, and they are all financial analysts, not the IT analysts. So they come and then say, okay, how to, because I'm investing there, so same thing, can I do it in real life? So these are the two examples I wanted to quote. But one last comment on the previous thing on cloud, let me complete it and then come to the use case. I believe there is one more threat on cloud, which I take ownership on behalf of IT industry, and saying that we need to fix it. That is about shadow cloud. The shadow cloud is perennial, she will acknowledge. Shadow cloud denotes those functions, those finance department who goes and buys something, some cloud from someone, right? Because they just want their Excel to be on the cloud, that's all. What purpose, they don't know. Somebody said, hey, it's a cool thing, why not you do? They tried it, right? And the threat and the privacy it injects both is something which, when we look at the overall cloud strategy, as a company, as an industry, we need to address it. That's my take. And on the use case, I believe as long as companies chase use case, it will be a blip, it will be a flashlight, and it will die down. As long as you look at a portfolio and then see how customers view it, the technology can, it was 4 years ago, it was Google Glass. Today, Google Glass has been replaced with the VR thing. So instead of looking at use case based approach, it would help a portfolio based approach is my recommendation. That's
sure, absolutely. It's just that when a technology starts, you start with a use case and then make it end to end. So, Sneha, to you, where do you see application of AR, VR in a pharma situation?
So right now, to be honest, we haven't actually implemented any use case there. But Obviously, we have looked at what is available in the industry, and we had our own IT conclave in Cipla last week, where a lot of partners came and put up what is available as technology, so that we can just start getting awareness in the organization to say, where can I start using some of these things in some of my areas. So Microsoft came and showed us how you could use virtual reality. HP was there. I think some of the things that came back to us as an ask, largely the first area was saying, can I use it in training? And to Bala's point, to say, on the shop floor, if there is a problem with the machinery, can my people be trained on it using wearing the HoloLens or wearing any of those things? And also for things like gamification, classroom training, because again, in a pharma industry, training is extremely critical. People have training records, inspectors come and see, were you trained on this machine before you really use the machine? Did you go through this particular training? So can we really have virtual classroom training programs and cover up people across, global Cipla? So those are the two use cases that we're looking at, but we haven't really taken off on anything right now.
So they do say that for training, it is going to take up the productivity big time.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Matrix is probably the best use case for AI, AR and VR.
And why not the Pokemon Go?
Yeah.
So I think with this we have more or less, covered some of the areas we wanted to cover. There was an interest in knowing, given the way digital transformation is going, our students, what kind of skills should they look at? I mean, as the to-be managers that work in a world of such immense technology changes, So, Mandar.
Take some questions from the floor. I think we managed to put a couple of guys to sleep.
So, if there are any specific questions.
Okay, I request Harsh and Aditi to help the audience with the microphone and direct your questions either to the entire panel or to the panelists.
Hi sir, good afternoon everybody. And it's a great pleasure to hear from you guys some great insights. So my question is, GDPR has come now, and there will be, all the companies will be doing the spending on the GDPR. This is the first time customer has got the right to get the data deleted, which in banking, as you are aware, we have worked on BFSI. BFSI never deletes the data. We keep it because we don't know 5 years down the line audit can happen or something can happen. This is the first time such type of request can come from the customer. How data science needs to change based on GDPR, because now my data might not be fully available for data analysis, data science. So what those type of changes, how companies will adapt to that, and with the kind of extent the way the technologies are evolving. We were talking about cloud computing till now. Banks have, the bigger guys, the big banks have yet not adopted cloud. We are talking about private cloud, on-premise cloud, and then there is fog computing over IoT. So with these kind of changes, do you see an impact on customer spending also? They will wait and watch. Why will they spend immediately? Anyways, it has gone agile. They don't want to do on a waterfall, big billion deals now. So how do you see the impact, and how do you see the industry moving?
So on GDPR, let me start. So you need to understand GDPR a little bit more. It's not that the customer can delete every bit of data that exists.
Just the debits alone.
And the PII data is what they can delete,
Yes,
right? So
yes.
your transaction history, you would be, the banks or whoever holds your data will need to mask it and give you right to delete the PII data, but your transaction or your historical may not need to delete. So that's number one, right? So the compliance requirements of banks is that way taken care of, whether you want to retain 7 years and something like that. So number one. Number two, I think that's what on GDPR. So your question about, second question around IoT and fog and all of that, people are spending, right? Because we are living in a digital disrupted world. If I don't adopt the latest technology and disrupt my own business model, somebody else is going to adopt. I think his keynote was great, right? The taxi to Uber and Chasea, right? Is what is happening. If I don't disrupt, if I don't look at, if I am an industrial, if I am a manufacturing organization, I don't look at IoT, if I don't invest and become an early adopter, there is going to be other manufacturer who is going to do that and have a better business model and disrupt me. So people always invest in technology. The question is at what point of time. Some of them are more risk taker and would invest in something which is very, very nascent. Some of them would wait, let it be mature a little bit. For example, blockchains, it is now that you are seeing a lot of investment from customers happening. We have been talking about blockchains for maybe close to 2 years now, but this year you see a lot of people are actually coming out with solutions. POCs have been happening even last year, but now you see customers actually rolling out their services using blockchain. So same thing will happen on fog and IoT and stuff like that. IoT is real. IoT I don't think is a future investment. It's happening right now.
So there was one, are you able to hear me? Yeah. There was one recent article which said that, if you are based on the mobile, the brand of mobile which you carry, you will be decided whether you are eligible for a personal loan or not, right? So there is, the level of data capture for lending there are new models which are coming in, right? You heard about Creditech as a German company. What it does is it actually captures all your internet history, browsing history, your social media, all the information which is available about you on the internet. And then they decide to, they do a credit scoring, and then they give you, whether you are credit worthy or not. Now this is phenomenal for the people who are new to credit, NTC, right? Who would want to be part of this. But look at, where it's also stretching people, right? We have credit cards, then we have personal loans. Now to catch up with, the next phase, which there is a company called Early Salary. You can even bet on your salary, right? So paisa kahan se aayega? Matlab, you are now spending on credit card, you've taken a personal loan, and there's no money coming at the end. So I'm just saying that it's also because of the habits of the people, how they are changing. But all of these are getting captured into the credit worthiness. So in terms of, I probably perceived your question more in terms of the consumer spending. The consumer spending will continue to grow, irrespective of whether you are, whether you are part of this or that particular, vertical, that particular class who gets the loan. It's just that the type of data on which the business models will be built would change, and GDPR, PSD2 will keep, there might be some variations to these, but at the end of the day we have to, it's a basic trust in the financial world which has to decide, whether you're eligible for a loan or not. So that data capture will continue, and obviously a lot of that data can be eliminated, will become irrelevant, and can be waived off over a period of time.
Thank you.
Good evening, panelists. So my question is for Mr. Srikanth. This is regarding digital disruption in the fintech space. So we see a lot of companies which are coming up with new innovative technologies and new ways to service the customers. So how do we see traditional banks, be it PSUs or the private banks, bracing themselves up to counter or not counter or compete with these technological innovative companies? And second, how we as consumers and managers need to brace ourselves or augment our skill set to cope up with that.
Sure. So I'll just bring up one concept for you so that you guys are clear, right? What's happening is the traditional value chain where banks used to compete with each other across the value chain. So bank will have its own customer interface, it will have its own products, it will have its own infrastructure, versus another bank is now breaking down because there is this disassembling, right? You are seeing that a lot of fintechs are coming and saying, look, I will only offer you a type of service. The transaction is done from the bank, but I will offer you only product. There are aggregators which are like Bank Bazaar, Paisa Bazaar, who are coming in and saying, I will just provide you comparative quote, and then the lead goes to the bank and bank takes a decision, right? So there is this entire disassembling or deconstruction of value chain which is happening in the financial world because of disruption. That is number one. Now for you to think about what banks need to do is they need to simply identify the fintechs, and I was talking about this earlier with the gentleman here, is you need to think about a capital driven growth versus a network growth. Banks have to move towards there are a lot of challenger banks, attacker banks. Are you guys familiar with what is attacker bank or a challenger bank? No. So it's more like DBS, what they have launched as an app, right? It's an app. Or Fidor, which is a new bank which is in Europe. So those banks have still invested their own money and they are creating their own channels, which is a capital intensive, their own play. versus a network which is building an ecosystem model and moving towards that. So banks have to now take up a network driven strategy or network driven growth, which means that they essentially have to partner with fintech and identify the right fintechs to work with that. For you, to answer your second question, for you to be ready with, you need to start analyzing what are the new business models. What was happening is we were thinking like, a couple of years ago or, just till last year saying, fintech is creating phenomenal business models. But with blockchain coming in, the traditional fintech models are challenged, right? Have you guys heard about Slockit? It's a company which is challenging Airbnb, right? So you don't need like, as Bala mentioned, Uber or, Airbnb still have a centralized system. Why do you need a central person, right? It's an intermediary. So they are coming out, they are just, taking away that. Arcade City is another competitor to Uber, right? So you are actually now seeing even the traditional fintech business models are being challenged by blockchain concepts, right? And blockchain is evolving very fast. So all you need to do is you need to find the right opportunities to work in those areas. I don't think, with due respect to all the education we have, you need to do more projects which are hands-on projects and be connected with what fintechs are doing today. And maybe some of you are probably the millionaires, billionaires of future. You have great alums, so you can connect with them. But you should. The biggest mistake you would make is to aim low, right? Lowballing yourself and not thinking about creating unicorn would be a mistake.
Any more questions or okay?
Omol Roy, my question is to the panelists. Taking a cue from very impactful presentation by the students team on use of artificial intelligence in healthcare industry. So I wish to know whether AI is being used in drug discovery or in clinical trials and tracking of counterfeit medicines, as also in the area of date expiry stocks, which is a lot of financial implication in pharma industry in India.
Okay, so I think I can aim at attempting it. So I'll take one step back. So if you're talking about the drug discovery state, technology is being used, but not necessarily be artificial intelligence at this point in time. Talking about drug counterfeiting, it's now regulatory. You've got to have your serialization on the product, on the case, on the drug. So there are applications, technology that helps you track that, right? From your production line to where you have sold it to the customer who's got it with the serial number that's going through. So there are softwares and technologies available for that. The data on that can be analyzed using artificial intelligence or machine learning, but the core technology to capture the information is through a main system. So I picked up drug discovery, I picked up counterfeiting. What was your third one?
Clinical trials.
So clinical trials, yes, we are using artificial intelligence. In fact, we've just started a use case for our own clinical trials function. Right from the selection of the CRO to where can you optimize the site to what is the size of patients that you need, what is the kind of information that you're getting from that. We've just started on a use case on that. We still have to see what we're getting out of it. But there is a lot of opportunity to use it for clinical trials, yes.
And what you're saying is if you really look at AI, we can't say it's going to transform the entire thing, right? But if you look at the value chain, simple things like clinical trials, a lot of documents being written, and if you really have to digitize it, there is a good amount of ML and NLP which actually reads the documents, puts it in. The QC function again, to actually see if these are validated rightly. The pre-checking is actually now done by AI, which actually looks for certain patterns to say, is it a real document or is it a fake document that's come in? So if you don't try to transform it as a whole, but to see, can I apply it in low risk areas which adds value, definitely there is a lot of AI in the... It actually assists in regulatory requirements.
It enables it completely, yeah.
Because the bot documents is self-documenting.
Hello, good afternoon, sir. My question is from Mr. Manda. So you touched upon AI in agriculture and weather. So I want to know what business opportunities you foresee in agriculture and weather, knowing that weather poses a severe risk to the agriculture output and income of farmers?
One of the areas where we are massively investing, Microsoft, is what we call as AI for all or AI for good. And in India specifically, we are working with a lot of to these two domains. There are a lot of projects which are going on ground with a lot of agricultural institutes, governments, agricultural departments, as well as there are a lot of NGOs or farmer organizations. We are working with them. So essentially, if you look at it, there are 2 or 3 different problems that we are trying to solve. First, there is a lot of data available on weather. So there is no dearth of data, but that data has to make sense and it has to reach on time, right time to a farmer so that they can make the decision, number 1. Number 2, based on change of weather patterns, we need to provide them guidance on what should be what is the crop that they should be going after. That is the second area. And third is all around soil, right? Whether it is quality of soil and how it is changing, water, and you can do lot of modeling around it, because soil is not a constant thing, right? It changes with water and a lot of other factors. So these are the 3 areas where there is a lot of work being done. What are we doing today? We are working with these 3 type of organizations, whether the different government and quasi-government bodies as well as the end users, for processing that data, providing them that information and guidance. Now, that's number 1, what we are doing. Now, what business model exists? See, Microsoft is going to create, or people like us are going to create probably pilots, right? Or we are going to make the technology available. But from that technology, there have to be business so that it becomes self-sustainable. It's not that Microsoft will run this as a business model, right? We will prove that this works. We'll work with few farmers, few agencies to ensure that this is perfected. But who is going to make that mainstream? Who is going to take that to millions of farmers? That's the opportunity here. We are already, I'm sure, working with some organizations, but getting the data, processing it, providing that, and then changing it, right? Based on what information you provide to farmers, they are going to change their crop. How you are providing that information to farmers, you are working with them to get their crops produced back in central locations. All of that is a whole ecosystem that in India needs to evolve. As of today, there are those APMCs and few organizations who handle that. So there is whole revolution that needs to happen there. Today, I think productivity of our farmers is fairly low, and it's low for multiple reasons, including this information is not easily available to them. So opportunity exists in the entire supply chain. Getting this information, providing it to them, working with them to kind of make it change, and getting their produce back to back in the central ecosystem. I think we are just eking for that revolution to happen. Things are moving. Logistics was one of the areas that I mentioned, right? That is one of the areas which is what we are seeing definitely making a change. But that's one end of it. The whole upstream is where there is a lot of opportunity exists. And companies like us are going to make that available, but we are not going to create a business. It's not Microsoft business, or it's not a technology company's business. We are making that technology available. Somebody has to use that technology, create that business, and take it to farmers. A lot of opportunity in that area. Especially in Andhra, Telangana, you will see some of the startups very, very active in that area.
Sir, my question is to the panel. We are seeing disruption in the education space also. So do you think the digital technologies will replace the traditional schooling or the education way, the way we educate children? And do you think going digital is the way towards 100% literacy in a country like India?
I can try taking that, and then others please add to me. Certainly the way the technology is advancing, the virtual classrooms are a thing of the present, right? And when technology moves to virtual reality, augmented reality, you can imagine it can become so much more real and live. Classrooms will, to my mind, end up being place where, you know, a very learned professor or someone shares his insights, his or her insights. But a fact-based learning, certainly it can be taken over by a virtual classroom or, you know, augmented reality classroom, so to speak. But yes, the underlying technology infrastructure have to be there to enable that, right?
I was slightly, I would not say different, maybe an added thing. See, what is very difficult to replace in the classroom, replace in technologies, is the collaboration or the interaction that you have, right? And you guys are in management, so I think that's the teamwork, the collaboration. Technology can teach you a subject matter, right? But the work that you do together, whether it is you and your professors or you and your co-student, is very difficult to replace. Microsoft has a big collaboration portfolio, so we collaborate a lot using Skype and stuff like that. But does that mean we never meet? That's not the case, right? So I think that piece of learning would still remain in classroom. But to answer your first part, technology might make education more accessible to India, because it's very difficult to have so many classrooms and quality education. You have one SP Jain, right? And what if that content, the rich content that you are generating, is limited only to this classroom? So can you make that digitally available to people in remote areas? I think that's where technology can make a big impact. But I don't think it will replace the experience.
Let me add to what you said. The digital touch points, so you don't need to touch the core of education sector, right? Core of education sector, wherever the infrastructure is better, like the example like ASP Jain here, you don't need digital touch points to change the classroom per se, right? But you need to look at what are the other digital touch points that can be enabled for better quote unquote student experience. When I say customer experience before, now I am talking about student experience, right, which is the major consumer for a university or an institution. But on the contrary, when you look at from the rural and going deep root within India, the need of the hour is the smart classes, and the quality education that he touched upon. How are you going to bring in quality education to the larger masses so that they are able to scale up their quality, in their this one? So when they tomorrow branch out from rural into Mumbai city, they are still able to get an admission in SPG. That is what is the revolution, that a business model you can target to look at how to strengthen that. And I'm sure you do that, literacy rate will automatically follow. That's my personal view.
So I would even fundamentally question what you call education and what do you need for the next 20 years or something, right? If you get time, you look at Jack Ma's video. He spoke at Davos earlier this year, and he says that whatever we taught, the way we taught for last 200 years, is not going to work in the future, right? What he says is that what we need to teach people, it's not just necessarily students, right? People is collaboration, creativity. How do you actually solve a problem, right? We discussed some of those earlier. These are important dimensions. So I would even, I would say yes. The answer to the question is yes. It will help, educate more people. But the type of education we need in future is not going to be the same what we learned in the last 200 years, right? So you have to challenge yourself. You have to ask yourself a question that am I learning only from the book or the person who is next to me? Am I having a conversation with the group and where we are collaborating and creating something which individually one person was not able to create? That is the future of education. It's not about just reading books and having a content driven understanding of your own.
Okay, in the interest of time, we'll just limit ourselves to one last question.
Hello? Hello, ma'am. Just to in a lighter moment, a papa asked his son, what is your program for the Sunday? He told me, I will put up in WhatsApp. Bye, papa. So from that perspective, is not this high technologies reducing the high touch, the relation, the activity? Is there a commensurate reduction in the relation consequent upon the advent of the technology height? What is your opinion? Anybody can answer this.
Ma'am, you want to address this? This is like a perennial question, right? Every generation thinks next generation is out of the league.
You're right. The touch points are coming down. The physical touch points are really coming down, right? And that is something, you've seen any number of videos about how a family sits down for dinner or lunch and everyone around the dinner table is on a device, right? And nobody is talking to each other, right? Certainly, technology is an issue there, and smartphone-less time is something that all of us need to, kind
I
of
have a suggestion.
force ourselves
You
with.
can threaten your kid by saying, I will not give you the Wi-Fi access. Then you can have a face-to-face meeting.
Even it is a challenge to a faculty to see that students do not use mobile phones during the class.
Absolutely. Yeah. So thank you so much, panelists. That was a wonderful panel discussion. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and thoughts. Thanks. Thank you.
And also a big thank you to the audience for the enthusiastic participation. Give yourselves a big round of applause, guys. On behalf of the SPJIMR family, we extend our heartfelt thanks to all panelists for taking the time to visit our campus and be a part of this conclave. We look forward to your visit again, and we hope you enjoyed interacting with the students. I now request Shruti and Bipasha to present a token of our gratitude to the esteemed panelists. The first panelist, Mr. Mandar Kulkarni.
Our next panelist is Miss Neha. The next panelist is Miss Neha.
Next panelist, Mr. Shrikant Patil.
Our next panelist is Mr. Ashok Balasubramanian.
And of course, Mr. Balasubramaniam Vedagari. And most definitely Professor Shailaja Jha as well.
A lot of planning, preparation, and coordination goes into putting up an event of this nature. Samavesh is a student-led event. So for all the enthusiastic participation, all the hard work, all the sleepless nights, and all the patience and the teamwork, a big thank you to all the participants of PGPM 2018.
I would like to take this opportunity to thank Dean Ranjan Banerjee, Professor Prem Chandrani, Professor Anjali Malik, Professor Nilendra Singh Pawar, Professor Anil Vaidya, Professor Shailaja Jha, Professor Ratika Gore, Professor Abbas Ali Gabula, and all PGPM staff members for their constant support and encouragement. The event would not have been possible without them.
Student-led committees are what drive all activities at SPJIMR. Committees help our participants understand how to work and influence without power, a critical component of teamwork and management. Team Samavesh, composed of members from the industry integration and the public relations, and included volunteers from alumni, placement, cultural committees, and the Speak Up and Quiz clubs. And last but not least, the core team of the Information Management Conclave, John, Upali, Geetika, Shirshendu, Pramod, Makrand, Garvita, Rishi, Kondanya, and Bipasha. A big round of applause for Team Samavesh and our sponsor for the event, Amazon Eco Dot. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys. A big thank you to everyone. With this, we close the Information Management Conclave. I request the panelists, Professor Vaidya and Professor Jha, to join the student presenters, Nitin and Rujita, and IM Conclave leads, John and Upali, on the stage for a quick photo.